I'm going to pull up my YouTube channel too, down below. All right, good morning, everybody. I have no idea at this particular moment exactly what it is that you're looking at, so I hope that it's something awesome. If it's really crazy, I'm trying to look on the other screen. If it's really crazy, we're going to switch to just coming in through Zoom, but I'm really happy to be here with everybody, and welcome. Bryan, you're back. You've come back.
Yeah, I'm back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. It's been a little bit.
How long has it been?
God, has it been a year already?
No, I think the last time we were doing something together, because I did the academy, but that was just kind of solo recording. But the last time we were on call together was at least 2020.
Oh my gosh, that seems insane because we collaborate so well together. So it seems insane that we've not done more.
Yeah, we fell into a hole and now we've returned together. 2 Mercury out of bounds.
Yes, well,
people.
I think it's funny because I had to unsubscribe to several email sources and things like that. And people were emailing me asking, did we do something wrong? And I was like, no, I just Mercury out of bounds to myself into too much information and I had to pull back. Rein it in. So good morning, everybody. We've got people here from Brazil and Vancouver this morning, the Netherlands, England. So welcome. Good morning. It's a pleasure to see everybody. All right. So today we're going to just talk. You guys had asked some questions. I did the nodal video on Janet Jackson. If you haven't had an opportunity to check that out, I will make sure that it is linked in the video down below here. You can also search through the videos and see, what we've been getting up to. But you asked questions about your own nodal returns, nodal squares. What's an inverse return and how does that show up in the chart, or what are some of the effects that you can potentially feel from that? So I went and found Bryan and we're going to just casually talk about that today because those are big moments. I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like the nodes are everything. I actually feel like they are like contenders in the energetic chart where I'm like, if one of these gets an activation, you've really got some business going on. What about you?
Oh, totally. I practice evolutionary astrology and we honor the nodes just as much as the primal triad, I would say.
Yeah.
Sun, moon, and ascendant. Everything in this chart is important as an integrated wholeness, but yeah, the nodes are major.
Major. And so when you discuss in evolutionary astrology, when you discuss the nodes, what's the vision or what's the concept about it, just in case people have not heard of them quite yet?
Well, we take a slightly different take on them. Typically, the south node is related to past, the north node is related to future, but we use the reincarnational model. So when we read the south node and all the planets involved with the nodal structure in somebody's birth chart, we look at the south node as karmic habit energies, basically. It's like, what is this person's last life? What was it like? Maybe even last set of lives. Because I believe that we're in a kind of a kindergarten through 12th grade here, on planet Earth, and being a 10th grader is no better than being a first grader, just a different lesson plan. And sometimes it can take multiple lifetimes to pass a grade. That's my belief anyways. So we get a sense of when reading the South Node, which by the way, I taught how to do that in your academy, reading the karmic story. So if anybody wants to check that out, they can find it on your channel.
Yes.
It's looking at those habit energies and getting a sense of what it must have felt like to be them in the past life, Because the nodes of the moon represents heart, represents feelings. It's like the emotional memories. So, we were just talking about out of bounds Mercury, but the Mercury is of the mind, of the intelligence. We don't remember the past lives, or at least most people don't. The mind doesn't remember, but the heart sure remembers, And then the North Node is like the karmic remedy or medicine to help offset the karmic imbalance or if there was any wounding there. So when we read the nodes, we describe the south node a little bit more negatively, not to be negative, but to just kind of focus on what went wrong in the past life. And then look to the north node, focus on the higher ground potentials of the north node as a potential medicine.
Yeah.
But that's more like our perspective on the birth chart nodes.
Yeah, but that's absolutely beautiful. And coming from evolutionary as well, and then adding in other things, I look at it and I say, okay, here in this plane, in this time, this south node, you have overly developed these characteristics and traits. So it's like an easy fallback. You know how to go to it, use that, get the job done. But it's a lot harder to come to that north node side and kind of process and move through your world in that way. And every time you do, though, it's just like golden nuggets. And I lately have been feeling a lot like when we're talking about healing our lives and healing the nodes, that healing in its truest form, I'm wondering is it just about feeling everything that we couldn't feel and we can't when we just operate south node, and we get to actually feel it and heal it through the lens of that north node. So it's a really interesting balance. And I want to say too, if you're new and you're listening, neither one is good nor bad necessarily. I have certainly had some south node time over this last couple years that helped me build a lot. I'm a south node in Capricorn. I have built, and it's been wonderfully successful. So sometimes a south node activation can be really great, as well, depending on what the season of life is. And so, I don't know. What's your experience? What are your experiences with nodal activations for yourself?
I consider it like the karmic wave is breaking in your life. You have a tremendous opportunity when your nodes are being stimulated to work on your karma. And I totally agree with you about like nothing's inherently bad or good. All symbols have a higher octave expression, a lower octave expression. And I've heard sometimes from some people that like they're trying to get away from their south node, like pretend it's not there, close their eyes and just focus on the north node. And focusing on the north node is really healthy. But like we don't want to forget about the good qualities of the south node, because like somebody's south node is karmic habit energies.
Yeah.
There's beautiful qualities about those too, And when I'm actually giving a reading, like I point out the positive qualities, and then I say, okay, but we're going to talk about the negative now, because, obviously you didn't sprout angel wings and ascend. You came back, so you messed up somewhere with that energy. So, it's like it's more useful information, but we always honor the good. So those, somebody has a south node in Scorpio, the good qualities would be they're deep and psychological. And their ability to think underneath the surface of things, to think suspiciously, to think psychologically, to generate incisive, sensitive insights into other people's processes. They're deeply connected to their emotional world. Those are all beautiful things, but it went too far. I look at the south node as kind of like extremes. And then dark side Scorpio would be the extreme side of that, which would be, it can be many things. You want to look at the total nodal structure, but like storminess, brooding, heaviness. So if they're born with their Taurus north node, Scorpio south node, they're trying to find that peace.
Yeah.
That Taurus peace. So
yeah.
I don't know if there was a question, I forget it already, but those are the thoughts that came up. I totally agree with you about nothing's inherently bad or good.
Yeah, well, and welcome to Monday, a moon day, while we're doing this talk. I feel like the ability to drift is going to be super real this morning, you guys. So let's just roll together. All right, well, so let's talk about some of these aspects that happen. And actually, you guys, before we do that, again, Bryan already has a class in the YouTube Academy. You can click into the free playlist. It's available on my homepage and check it out. Get some more information, get some grounding behind you if you haven't had a chance to interact with this information yet. And Bryan, you'll be back. We'll be doing a Q&A for year 2 of the Academy. We're funding right now. There's a link in the description box down below. So click down there, support the Kickstarter. We've got until March March 26th. So we're moving right along. So make sure you click in there and check it out. And you guys, if you want additional information, meditations, more connection with Bryan as a teacher, or there's something, in here that's juicy for you, I'll make sure links to his podcast and his channel and all of his connections are in the description box down below as well, okay? So people are having some returns, nodal returns this year. We're going to see some squares, some inverse returns. Some people will even be in a sextile. Just kind of depends on how you're rolling. But the big ones that I think are the return, the inverse, and the square. These seem to have a louder resonance in our lives that I think sometimes is more external as well. We can see it almost because I feel like the person is like overpowered with that karmic wave like you talked about. So let's talk about it a little bit. Let's talk about the nodal return first. So what's happening here is you'll see the transiting north node and the transiting south node will come to sit on top of your natal north node and your natal south node. And this happens about every 19 years. So I know that I look into people's charts. I look at right about 18 and a half-ish is when I know we're coming into the zone of, okay, we've got a time. So 18-ish, 37, 55, 74. If you're in that age range, you're somewhere near this nodal return. And it's like a homecoming. Anything to me is like a homecoming, like the charger fits, the plug, everything, we're connected back in. And I feel like with the nodes, it can almost be like a really, really deep breath. But my experience watching for me and watching charts is there's always a life-changing event. We do something, we go on our next adventure, whatever that may be. And I will say this too, I'm interested to hear what you think. I think we just live our patterns. Like we just live our patterns, which has mystified me over this last couple of years. And people are like, I've never been here before. I'm like, you have. You have, I assure you. Let's just find your pattern. So at this time, people having this nodal return going on this next adventure is like being pulled towards what they're actually supposed to be doing. What's this destiny point that you're here to do? And let's get busy doing that. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's a precious opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
It happens every 17 or 18 years. It depends. It happens for a period of time. I use about a 5-degree orb on either side, but you can use whatever orb you want. Some people use the whole sign, as an opportunity. But yeah, the karmic wave is breaking in your life, and it is a major triggering event. And it's such a blessing at that period of your life to really focus and harness the energies of that north node.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about Scorpio Taurus specifically?
Yeah, let's talk about that since that's where we're at. And also, I want to say for me, I'm an orb snob, like super. I'm an orb snob.
Nice.
But when it comes to the nodes, I give a full 10 degrees, which is like the only time that I do that. But after watching enough influence, I'm like, wow, God, the moon though, it's got wiggly fingers, just really easily able to reach out there. So, okay, Taurus, Scorpio, North Node, South Node. Man, that Scorpio South Node, I think you touched on it brilliantly. Like the ability to see to the root of what's really going on is incredible in that South Node, right? The ability to potentially, at an evolved South Node level, to wield and understand power is incredible. Mm-hmm. Out of balance. It does not look like that. It's a lot of power struggle, right? Manipulation, jealousy, fear, all of these key words we've kind of dealt with. What do you see in that South Node?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's like they got a PhD in psychology in the past life or set of lives.
Yeah.
Not through going to like college about it, obviously, but just through lived experience. And Scorpio South Node folks, typically, I mean, again, you got to look at the rest of the nodal structure, but they usually had a pretty bumpy path, in my opinion. There's a lot of storminess there, no pun intended. It's Scorpio past lives can often be feel like a bit of a psychodrama, which is why they got the PhD in psychology. They were witness to a lot of colorful behavior that's available to human consciousness, and they're using that psychological wisdom to this very day in the current life. And then the nodes trigger those nodes. Often it can bring about circumstances or patterns, as you said so beautifully. Now, what we do within those patterns is up to us. That's where the free will piece comes into play. But the Scorpio pattern of the storminess, of the drama, of getting triggered, of pain rising to the surface. Because Scorpio, is from the scorpion. And if you're walking out in the desert, I don't know why you would be, but there you are in the desert, and you look down and there's a scorpion by your foot. It's like, oh, you jump back, You get that charged jolt because you fear pain, you fear death, Scorpio's about charged emotional material. So sometimes when the trigger happens, if you have a Scorpio South Node, it's like that karma, the karmic wave is breaking in your life, inviting you to look at this pattern again. And see if you can heal beyond it.
And I find, though, that then you need to move towards that North Node to go on the adventure of healing, whatever that looks like. And so in this case, we move into the Taurus territory, which moves from this watery, emotional nature to a very earthy, material, grounded, present, steady energy. It's very steady.
It is.
It's just because I'm a Taurus. I'm like, our word this week is steady. So we move from having to have all of this power struggle to creating something, using that power instead to create something steady, to invest and involve in relationships in the material plane, I think in a different way that involves less fear. Would you say that? I think that Taurus energy really represents a lot more trust in the surroundings.
Yeah, and also it just reminds us to breathe. That body-centered awareness with Taurus. Because when we get triggered in a big way, like pain comes up, like we feel it in our body so intensely, right? Like I've had periods in my life where I got really angry, and it's like, that's a powerful force, anger, and you almost feel possessed in a sense, like it's an energy that's so strong, like it alters your personality slightly, like critical thinking goes right out the window,
Yes.
You get hot-headed, it's a powerful force. And there can be a lot of complexity with these traumas. And, actually, Scorpio, the great god Scorpio, my teacher calls him the god of complexity. It's also complex with a furrowed brow, And then Taurus is the great god of simplicity. So it's that opportunity to go from complexity to simplicity. And it's, Taurus is about animal energy. Like being in the present moment, being in nature, being with the breath, eating, breathing, touching, building something,
Yeah.
And I just love the idea of like returning our conscious awareness to the body if we're feeling that big trigger and just breathing into it.
Yeah.
And not thinking thoughts, let's say you get triggered or something and somebody does something nasty to you. Sometimes I've got caught in the habit where that happens, I get triggered, and then I like replay the situation in my mind, like over and over again. And then I fantasize about what I could have done better, like stood up for myself or told them off in this way. And I'm like doing this dark fantasy,
right?
This egoic fantasy. And what you're doing is you're feeding that little gremlin in you, that little, I see emotions as like living,
Absolutely.
And especially the traumas. So if you're feeding it with the complexity of your thought and just milling that over, it grows stronger almost, right? So Taurus is just like, breathe. And in fact, Eckhart Tolle, in one of his books, he conveyed a suggestion. It's been like a long time since I read it, so I'm paraphrasing here. But if you, because he's big on the present moment, the power of now, so if you're triggered and you're outside the present moment, one of his suggestions was to just focus your conscious awareness like somewhere in your body, the trunk of your body, and don't think any thoughts, and just breathe. And within a couple minutes, it just melts. It's like getting an A+ in Taurus during a South Node Scorpio moment,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, because first of all, that is what we call, friends, a resentment, right? I'm going to resend that moment over and over and over again. And in the complexity of it, in that scorpionic energy, bringing it back home, I think Taurus is like, because Taurus will really bear the brunt. So I think the wisdom of a Taurus North Node is to say, well, what was my part in this? Because that's the only piece I can be free of, which never says that another party didn't, behave poorly or anything like that. But the wisdom, I think, in Taurus is, well, I can only do anything about me. So let's simplify. And then I get to be free of my resentment, which is a really beautiful thing, I think. So when you're...
Yeah, there's that, sorry to interrupt, it just made me think of like the earth sign practicality, responsibility, ownership for that, so beautiful.
Absolutely, right. And Taurus is like, this is too complicated. I'm just trying to eat my curds and whey. What do I need to do to be able to do that? So when you're in this North Node energy, so if you're experiencing that out there, I know that when my North Node, my nodal return came around, I had a ton of deja vu, just a ton. Like I have been here 100 times, and I love deja vu because I feel like they're little spiritual check-ins to be like, yeah, you haven't been sure, but you are on track. So this awareness and this awakening that I'm moving towards something else, but it does come, in my experience, through the South Node pain, right? I've had enough here that propels me to move in the direction of my North Node. And it's always the adventure. I'm 18, 19, I'm going to college, I'm going here, I'm doing this. So if you're in your nodal return, look around. What did you do when you were 18, 19 years old? Flash back to that. If you're a little bit older, go to 37. What were you doing that you took this next big leap that came out of that big bolstering South Node kind of energy? Whatever it is, I think that there's a clarity and awakening and evolution that happens with that. Anything else you would tell people to be looking for in that experience?
Yeah, I mean, you can get very specific with in terms of what their nodes are, the signs, the houses, the larger framework of their birth chart. You can get pretty specific, with suggestions and how to work with it. But just super simplified, when the karmic wave is breaking in your life, you recognize what some of those triggers might be reflected connected to the South Node, and then really focus on that North Node, especially if you're having your nodal return, where the North Node is in the same sign returning to it.
Yeah. Good times. Well, if you're having a nodal return, let us know in the chat. I see some of you are actually having it. So I hope that, whatever's coming out and coming towards your adventure. And if you're watching children, grandchildren, people in your community about 18, 19 years old, they're going through a time, they're preparing for their adventure out there. And it's kind of sweet, I think. Now, nodal square. Yay. I actually like squares. They don't always feel great, but
Yay.
I think that they're useful. When I see a chart and it's loaded with squares, I'm like, okay, you're in action.
This is a complex person. Yeah.
Right? Or I'm like, okay, you're doing something. When I sometimes when I see, like, especially by transit, a chart that has a lot of trines or sextiles, I'm like, man, what are you doing? Because probably nothing. Like, everything feels really good right now, you know? So under squares, though, when we're looking at squares, these come on quite early. We're children when we start to experience these cross purposes in our lives. And so what's the oldest? The oldest one is 4 or 5. 4 or 5? 4? You're about 4. Yeah. Okay. When you have this
Sounds
one,
right.
and then doing the math, and then you'll have them all the way up. So 4, 13-ish, all the way up to 60, 69 or longer. But what's happening essentially when we're having this square is that cross-purpose energy. And I know this feeling all too well. I'm very sensitive to my nodes, where I am like, I am trapped here. Like, I'm not on the road of where I need to be going. And it feels like this, I've got to make a decision, right? It feels like the square, I'm being squished on, and I've got to make a decision because I am out of alignment with someplace I'm supposed to be going. And my experience for my nodal structure is that there is always a really short relationship that pops in, and it is nicely intense and powerful. And I'm like, whoa. That's how it feels to me, is like a super whoa. I don't know what your squares have felt like.
Really just focused on relationships coming in?
Well, typically that's what it feels like to me. You know, I mean, I'll be on my way here in 2 years, so let's just see.
Who's coming?
I know.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you.
Well, they're serving as a blessing, an angel, a reminder, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I
pointing
love
the
that.
way.
I love that. Bryan, this is why I hang out with you. It is.
Yeah, there's a purpose.
Right? Like a click that kicks you back onto your path. That's like, hey, this is not maybe where we belong, or we're moving in a different direction, or a drive for a different experience that I think angles us more towards the North Node movement. What about you? What else can you say about this nodal square? And if you're having a nodal square, tell me in the chat. I'm right here with you.
Yeah, squares are, they tend to be a little more challenging, I guess you could say. You know, they involve a little more effort, compromise. They're a little more uncomfortable. They're not bad, they're just hard, you know. And I really love the squares, even though I might not admit that in the moment.
Correct.
You know? Yeah. Because I feel like we can grow so much through the squares. And if we're here to grow and to learn and to pass the grade or whatever, precious opportunity. You know, it's like taking one of those exams at school that you're underprepared for, and it's a little difficult, and you're sweating bullets, and it's a little more stressful. But if you pass it, it's like, what a breakthrough. You know? Yeah. So, yeah, the oppositions and the squares just tend to be a little trickier to navigate. But the growth potential is so much.
Yeah. Well, and I think that at the square as well, I don't know. I don't think we always have to. I don't know that we always have to, or that we always do move towards that North Node. I'm just thinking about it now, because there were a couple squares where I'm like, yeah, I've still got some South Node business to handle, apparently. You know, and it wasn't this like leap towards the North Node, but there was definitely doing some Capricorn work in the South Node. So I don't know that we always like leap one direction or the other, but the internal feeling of it can be trapped. I need something else, different direction. Okay. Yeah, some people are not experiencing a nodal square just yet. That's okay. Hang out. Just keep hanging out. Yeah, you know, I mean, if you just don't die, you will have one. I mean, I don't know another way to have one, right? That you can't you don't like will it on. It's just cyclical. Okay, so let's talk about the inverse return though, because there are plenty of folks having that. And I like the inverse return because I feel like, especially at 27, it is getting you ready for that Saturn return, right? It's like, okay, in a couple years, you're going to become an adult, so let's get a couple of things sorted here. Now, when you're having the inverse nodal return, you're going to have the transiting south node sitting on top of your natal north node and vice versa on the other side. And I love the way this was described for me. It's the past meets the present, and you're staring down the alley of your future, right? Kind of just this alignment of energy where it is a wake-up call. Like you are on track or you are not, but we're gonna check in. There are going to be some results, effects, consequences, and all other things to get us to adjust. What's your experience?
Yeah, the inverse is a lot like the square. You know, it's in the sense of it's trickier. With the squares, you're trying to juggle some other signs in the mix, you know, like Aquarius and Leo, for example, if we're talking about Taurus and Scorpio. But the inverse, you're still working on that same nodal axis, it's just flipped around.
Yeah.
So it gets rather complex, you know, because, for example, let's say you have your north node in Taurus, then the transiting node would have, transiting north node would be Scorpio. It's like you're trying to integrate these energies, and they're creating even more friction than they normally do, right? So you're trying to simultaneously manifest the higher octave expression of Taurus and Scorpio at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they also, in terms of triggers, we were mentioning triggers, the trigger of the patterns. You know, the inverse, those triggers tend to be pretty pronounced. You know, hence the challenge of them. And you know, one example I talked about before was you get triggered in a big way more than you normally do, and you're focusing on that north node in Taurus and just bring your attention to your body and let that melt. You know, return to the present moment, and just because really your birth chart nodes is really foundational. That's bedrock. You know, you can focus on the sign of the transiting nodes, of course, but it's like, okay, Taurus north node. And what I love about it is like it's so simple. There's that word Taurus word again, because the evolutionary intention of working with Taurus is basically to calm down, because it's ruled by Venus, the goddess of peace. You know.
That's so
you
wonderful.
Said you're a Taurus, right?
I am.
Okay, yeah. So God said to you before you were born, calm down, Stormie.
Like, yeah, less. We need less.
Yeah, so trying to find that peace inside of yourself. You know, that's the intention with Taurus.
Yeah, well, and when we get in the inverse, it's kind of neat, because I feel like that transiting north node gets on top of your south node and is like, look, I'm just going to show you through your own insides and attitudes towards things why you don't need this set of behaviors anymore. Like why they don't serve you. So it's like an internal, I just feel like it's such a neat awakening, right? Because there's no denial. You're like, oh yeah, I have been using this to mask, or I have been taking this action because I believe it will produce fill in the blank thing over here. And then you see it and it's like, oh, I actually don't need it anymore. And so the inverse, I feel like, is a real cosmic gift to clarity, because we just get to see why we don't need it anymore. Now, I don't know about you, but what I've also seen is people will tend to do the opposite of what they did at their nodal return. It's like whatever they were doing at the nodal return, it shows up in the inverse in some way, inverted. Like we do the opposite thing. Have you seen that? Because you practice evolutionary, so you're looking at a lot of nodal work. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that, you know, definitely. And I think that's, tied up in the idea of an opposition, right? You know, it's like a flipping. Yeah, so that makes sense. And I've seen it in a variety of different ways. You know, it's just really have to, we can't look at anything in a vacuum. You have to understand the overarching, all the, and also transits and progressions at that time is influencing that in a major way. But I have definitely seen that pattern that you're making reference to, for sure.
Yeah, well, and it's nice. I feel like as you continue to experience the inverse returns getting older, you kind of, I don't know, you get your poop in a group a little bit. You're like, okay, I can actually withstand this planet. Like there's some strength that hopefully comes from it as well.
Yeah, that's the goal.
It is the goal, isn't it?
Doesn't always work that way, but that's the goal. That's the intention.
But that's the idea. Okay, good. So let's have a couple questions here. Okay, so tips for helping to integrate the energies when you're at a nodal return. Well, it's kind of interesting. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say, but in opposition, just in general, the suggestion I always make when you're in any kind of opposition is integration. Like it'll feel like a spin, I think, when we're not practicing the integration, because it can't just be one side or the other. You're looking for the sweet spot in the middle of both of these characteristics on how to navigate and maneuver. So if you're just going one way or just going the other, I think it feels a lot like a spin. So it's like, well, where can I take Taurus and Scorpio or whatever your sign axis is and use the best of both of their characteristics to move? And that is a way that I help people, through any of the oppositions that they find in their chart or they're having transit-wise. What about you?
Yeah, I think with the inverse return, you look at both north nodes, what signs they're in, so Taurus and Scorpio, and think to yourself, okay, what's the more evolved expression of Scorpio? What's the more evolved expression of Taurus? And the house they're in, of course. Mm-hmm. And then figure out how you can really play with those energies to the best of your ability. And then also be aware or, suspicious of the south node energies of both signs, where they can go awry. Mm-hmm. And just focus on that higher octave expression for both at the same time, which is easier said than done. So higher octave Scorpio is, basically a psychological breakthrough, an emotional breakthrough. It rises to the surface. Like, let's say, for example, because we're talking about this being a major triggering event. Let's say you're triggered about something and you're telling a friend about the situation that happened to you, and even as you're recounting the situation, you feel the emotion come up again and you feel strongly about this. And your friend says to you some very charged words. They say, I don't know if I should tell you something that you don't want to hear. It takes some bravery to say something like that to a close friend, even though you're close friends. And then you're like, go on, And they speak a fierce truth from a place of compassion. Yeah. And you could take that one of two ways. The less evolved way and get triggered even more, and like stomp off, Or you can reel it back a little bit, breathe, find that Taurus simplicity and say, thank you. There's something I wasn't looking at there. Take some that Taurus responsibility. Yeah. For your own part. It takes two to tango. And that's you getting an A+ on your report card with Scorpio. See, so, and then, of course, when you have that breakthrough, it cultivates more peace within you, because, and sometimes you can release those wounds. Mm-hmm. Because, Scorpio is the planet of transformation, or the planet, the sign of transformation. So is Pluto, the planet of transformation, because Pluto rules Scorpio. So, I don't know, that's just one example that came to mind, but it's like, okay, here's the high-end expression of both these signs. They're very different from each other, but how can I find the integration between them?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my epiphany of coffee one day, I have decided the news story for me with Scorpio needing to be ruled by both Pluto and Mars is because you have to transform. By that, Plutonian energy has to be destroyed and taken down. But then Mars, like, you have to do something. Like, you have to move, or you're just going to stand there and be set on fire, and how terrible. So that is not the official story, friends, just so you know that. But, I think of Scorpio too as that natural counselor energy. So one of the best things we can do when we're working with any version of Scorpio energy is to get someone else to look at us, because the only thing I can't see in any given room is me, right? So somebody else, like you said brilliantly, with enough love and compassion and courage to kind of call it, is going to be immensely helpful. So if you are doing a lot of Scorpio work right now, maybe don't go down those dark hallways by yourself, right? Taurus will happily hold your flashlight.
Yeah. Going through a process of transmutation, with the karmic wounds of the past.
Yeah.
Trying to transform some of that inner darkness. Even the best of us have dark sides, it's like in working with that. That's typically a Scorpio trigger, and then transforming that woundedness that manifests as egoism in a variety of ways into love and light.
Yeah.
And it helps you to climb the ladder of consciousness.
Which is interesting because Eckhart Tolle talks about it too. Maybe it's not him, maybe it's Jordan Peterson, but they talk about this idea of the immaturity that you can see in people who haven't been able to see and integrate both their light and their dark side. And I've really been thinking a lot about that lately, and kind of just noticing in people around me, and noticing in people that are younger and people that are older, this space of light even behind the eyes of a person who has seen their darkness and been able to integrate the understanding that I am definitely both of these things. And then how do I choose to evolve and move with that? And I think that's powerful. I just think that's powerful, particularly with these axes at this time.
Yeah, that's so Scorpio in a beautiful way. For example, like, let's say you have your north node in Scorpio, your south node in Taurus.
Okay.
South node in Taurus, I find past life energy, which can manifest in a variety of ways, but one of those is that there was not an avoidance, but just not really looking within on a deep level. I'm not saying they were like shallow or anything like that. They were just focused on different values,
Sure.
The simplicity of life. And often, like South Node Taurus, folks will, probably have been with agrarian cultures, or maybe within a hunter-gatherers group, or maybe heavily involved in the material world, like a banker or something like this. And there's shadow side Taurus, which we want to at least pay attention to with the South Node in Taurus, is that fixed energy of a stubborn refusal to adapt, and to really look within. There's a simplified way of living life that way. And they were also typically very good and wholesome people. But then we look at that more suspiciously as like that goodness had a stultifying effect upon them in some way. And with the North Node in Scorpio, it's not like they need to become bad, they need to become like more whole.
Yes, I
like
say they've got to become honest, because I think Taurus will avoid feeling because of its impracticality.
Yeah. Beautiful, yeah. Yeah, so it's more of like a yin-yang wholeness. Learning more about their dark sides and how to work with that.
Yes, Taurus energy out there, or where you have your Taurus energy in your chart. Have you felt that or been experiencing that, especially as the nodes are changing, where you're being called to more feeling specifically, or more to that? I don't even think it's necessarily shadow side. I don't know that I feel good about that particular phrasing, but just the deep feeling that comes with being alive and human. And wouldn't it be nice if we just thought well of everyone all the time? but we don't. Even ourselves, right? Even if I'm the only victim that I target. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's part of the experience here is like, the way I look at it is like every thought, every emotion, every intention, every desire, every action that we have in every living moment calibrates at a certain level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the higher level of consciousness, that stem from love and light and peace and connection and all that. And then the lower consciousness, we could say, that stems from fear, love and fear. It's an oversimplification, but that comes from our egoism, So that's looking through the lens of astrology, we can look at some of those archetypal fields at the high consciousness perspective and then the lower consciousness perspective and strive for the more virtuous expression of those archetypes, which are emphasized in our birth chart. They're emphasized in the transits and progressions we're experiencing at any given time. And really, astrology can beautifully describe like what patterns are up for us, not only in this lifetime, but in like a window of time.
Yes. And as long as we're being human is just a lot. Being a human, being conscious and participating in reality is a lot. And I think though, as long as we're doing our best to not make our bodies coffins for old emotions, and we're working through that to the best of our ability, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's like, trying to walk a path of staying awake and aware spiritually. Like if you're getting a C+ in spiritual fitness, it's really like an A in humanity in general, because you're automatically kinder and more aware than maybe somebody who just can't awaken. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I like to teach meditation and do guided meditations on my YouTube channel, because of course I got Neptune conjunct my sun in my birth chart, so it's kind of like, duh, it's like a natural thing to do. But I'll actually create meditations that are based on the archetypes, based on those patterns, and make those guided meditations to whatever specific patterns we're working through.
Oh my gosh. So on your YouTube channel right now, do you have things that are up for the Taurus, Scorpio axes? Do you have meditations that are available and ready?
Yes, but I didn't like make a video specific. I talk about the nodes in most of my videos, especially when they change signs, what they just did a few months ago. So I've been talking a lot about them, but I haven't dedicated a video specifically to the nodes changing signs.
Okay.
But so the meditations are more connected to the archetypal matrix or framework of all the stuff going on, which of course the nodes is a major piece of that puzzle.
Sure.
Yeah, so for example, like the last one I did, which I'm starting to upload my meditations on my podcast now instead of my YouTube channel as of a couple weeks ago, but it was a world peace meditation because of course what's going on in the world, but it was really focused on that Taurus North Node.
Brilliant.
It's like, how can we cultivate more peace?
I love that. So you guys, there will be links in the description box down below. As soon as we wrap up here, I'll get them put down there so you can check out Bryan's class that he's got going for the YouTube Academy, and make sure you funded or supported helping us get that funded. If you haven't, there's already a link for that. But also to Bryan's channel, Bryan's Patreon, and his podcast, so we can just have more experience there. You're doing beautiful work in the world, Bryan. I really appreciate you being a friend and just the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, likewise.
We're just being Mercury. Mercury out of bounds.
Yeah, we both have strong Mercury charts, so I think when we work together, it's really beautiful.
I know. And just for anybody who doesn't know, where is your Mercury placement?
Mine's in Capricorn, conjunct my Sagittarian sun. And then I have a Virgo moon in the 3rd house. So a lot of mercurial energy in my chart, So, and it's out of balance. So,
yeah.
How about you?
Yeah. So I have Mercury in Gemini in the 10th house opposing my Uranus and Sagittarius in the 4th, which I love, by the way. But I'm also a Virgo rising, so lots and lots of Mercury over
Such
here.
Such a chart ruler and in its own sign and in the 10th house. Whoa.
Which is what I love, I think, too, about interacting with you, because you just have this very adult Mercury. And I feel like, it's like here to tell the story and relay achievement and maturity to people. And I'm like, yeah, but, and I really enjoy that balance working with you. And it is out of balance. So, who knows? We'll see. More working together in the future is hopefully where we're going.
Yep. You're going to come on the podcast.
Absolutely. Going to be on the podcast. And you'll be back to the YouTube Academy. We'll be doing some live Q&A specifically on your class. So if you guys haven't had the opportunity to check that class out, I did put it in the chat box already. I'll make sure everything's in the description box down below. We are going to wrap up for today. If you are watching back on the playback, leave your comments down below. We'll both be around to kind of check that out and see what the experience was. And if you joined us live today, thank you so much. What a beautiful way to spend. Oh, is it the moon in Taurus today also? As we're chatting it up. We're starting with the Taurus moon this week, huh? I think so. How yay for that. So nice and steady. Strong and steady start for the week, you guys. All right, Bryan, thanks for being here, and we'll connect again soon.
Okay, Stormie. Thanks a lot.